Alright, so today we're going to be working on a 2012 Nissan Murano. We're going to be installing a CM DC3. We have already had the customer purchase the unit and the T-Harness. Now this particular one is going to be an NI5. The contents of the box is going to be the harness needed with the connections for your specific vehicle. Your white, which is your input harness, and the black, which is your output harness, door locks, trunk pop, things like that. This particular application also gives you the pins for the BCM for your door locks. So next thing is our accessories you're going to be using. So this specific application, we're going to be doing the ALARMIT kit. Now this will include the input and the output harnesses. Also includes the 4-pin green connector. So if you're adding a shock sensor additionally, or if you're adding a motion or something like that, you have everything that you're going to need between this box and your T-Harness. No worries. We're also going to be doing our DR5400 LTE piece from our DroneMobile and our T10 two-way LCD security remotes up to 1 mile range. Now, before we start, there's a couple things that I always like to do. And one is I like to print the guide. Now, if you guys are using your mobile web link, that's perfectly fine. I do that as well. But I'm a little old school in the aspect of I like to have something in front of my face that isn't going to go to sleep every few minutes. So what I do is I'll actually print my guide. So my T-Harness guide and my hardwire guide. Now the reason is just for a quick reference. Sometimes you don't know what's going on in a T-Harness, and if you have an issue, it's nice to be able to reference. But once we get to our programming stage, you simply fold it open and now you have your programming. So this is kind of to each their own, but that is something that does tend to help me as a quick reference without having to get in and out of the vehicle. Let's go ahead and head over to the vehicle and begin our installation. So the first thing we're going to do is unplug our mobile web link from our OBD2 connector. Second thing is we'll go ahead and release our hood latch, pop off our fuse box cover, and our side panels. Go ahead and get access to everything. You'll have, on this particular one, you have a gas cap pop, and then you have a traction control, your key cylinder, and your heater connections. Last but not least, your OBD2 connector. Alright, so the 4 connections we need to make now. One's going to be our OBD2 connector. 2 is going to be our brake switch. 3 is going to be our key port. And the 4th one is going to be our push to start button, right up next to heater control. Alrighty, so the first thing we want to do is grab our T-Harness out of the box here. Now you won't need all of the connectors because these T-Harnesses are meant for several different types of vehicles. So in this one, we're going to need our OBD2, our brake connection, our key port, and then our push to start button. So that's going to be all 4 connections. And this little one here is just our parking light wire. So as you can see, very limited installation. So now with the DAS, when you're installing these, it's a good idea to try to keep them as centered as possible in the vehicle, especially if your customer's after tilt. If you put it in a kick panel and you try to lift the opposing side of the car, generally things aren't going to happen as well as a customer would like them to. Also shock. You know, the rear right of the car is not going to shock when the front left is where your sensor is. So now this looks like a lot of wires, so we're only going to be using 5 total. Our lock, unlock, our siren output, and then the white is your input harness. So in this case, all we needed it for was our hood pin. So I just cut these down to what we actually needed. So we have a total of 5 wires coming out. We're only actually going to end up using most likely 2 or 3 of them. We're going to plug these into our controller. Now you can do this on the bench or in the car. Everybody's got their own methods. Nice thing about the DAS2 is that this is already at a default setting. So when you guys are installing this, you don't have to do any type of adjustment. You make sure the dial is all the way up between 8 and 10, and then you can mount and test your sensor. So when you're doing a drone, you want to make sure that you're going to be installing it towards the top of the dash pad. Also, you want to look for things like metal bars in the dash, things that can obstruct any type of signal, because this needs to be able to send and receive your cell signal. So most of the time, I'm always going to attempt to try and go towards a vent, or in this case, the Nissans, because a lot of them will have to pull the gauges. I'll go ahead and put it right up behind there. All completely plastic, does not obstruct the view of the drone. So for this instance, I know that I have a nice little pocket right up between the vent and the gauge cluster. And so that's where my drone is going. Also, when installing your RF kit, guys, make sure that your antenna is turned sideways on the glass and placed on it. Not straight down in a corner or next to some mirrored tent. They're tuned to go sideways. So just make sure you're putting them as close to the headliner there as you can. So we took our VS1 and VS2 connector, connected it to our OBD2. Our brake is run right up to our brake switch there, which looks to be on this installation, VS11 and 12. We have our push to start, our key port harness right here, VS7 and 8. And then 9 and 10 is installed right up at the push start. Now, you always want to run everything up and towards one direction. So you saw I have the drone, the RF kit, and everything rotating towards the fuse box. There's a couple reasons. One, we need to get another connection. Two is I wanted to stuff a lot of that stuff right up here. So all I had to do was make one connection for my parking lights, which in the guide here, it'll indicate which connector, where it's at, and what color as well. Soldered that, used electrical tape, and then I have a siren wire. All right, now that you've got all your plugs plugged in, we need to do a learning procedure. So this vehicle, you want to make sure you follow close instructions. Push to start. Some of them will have you put in the key cylinder or in the key port. Other ones will just have you turn it on normally. We need to take our key. We're going to go ahead and slide it in the key port. We're going to turn our ignition on, and we should get a green light for 2 seconds, and then it'll turn off after the red. Green lights. Good. So we properly learned. Now, turn it off. Go ahead and start the vehicle. Let it run for 15 seconds. And then what we're going to be doing is the tack learning, which is the second part of the programming procedure. Press and release the programming button, the red light will turn on, then it'll get green flashes once you get a good tack learn. So we got a good tack learn here. So now we go ahead and turn the vehicle off. And now you're properly learned to the car. All right, so now we've finished our installation. We're ready to test. So what we're gonna do is before we program our aftermarket RF kit, we're just gonna try it with the factory remote, just the 3-time lock. Now this is a push to start vehicle, so I've disabled the driver's door pin for you guys so it'll actually start. All doors, hood, and trunk must be closed in order to start a push to start vehicle. So we're gonna do 3-time lock. Lock, lock, lock. Now your DC3's got green flashes, you'll hear the clicks, and then it's gonna go ahead and start. Now this one I've got a 15-minute run time on. You're capable of shutting it right back down. Lock, lock, lock. Now it's gonna shut down. So now we can go ahead and program our remotes.